What do you mean you don't have the keys? I gripped my phone tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. The house is empty. That can't be right. Across the street, an older man rocked slowly on his porch, watching me pace the sidewalk in front of what used to be my home. The sun beat down on the for sale sign jammed into the front yard. The windows were bare. No curtains, no furniture, no life. 3 garbage bags sat at the front door like leftovers no one wanted. I knelt beside them and opened one. Inside were my clothes, high school yearbooks, and a torn binder labeled Pre-Law Prep. Another bag had framed photos, cracked glass pressing against a picture of my family at Sequoia National Park. Everyone smiling, everyone pretending. My name is Selena Cruz, and I had just driven 4 hours from my university in Santa Barbara to Fresno for spring break, only to find my entire family gone. No call, no note, no goodbye. They moved last week, my Uncle Marco finally said when I reached him. His voice wavered with guilt. Didn't they tell you? No. I looked at the bags again. They didn't tell me anything. I called my dad. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. Hello? His tone was flat. Dry. Dad? The house is empty. There are trash bags on the porch with my things. What's going on? A long pause. We moved. You're an adult now. Deal with it. Click. The call ended. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I called back. Voicemail. I tried my mom. Voicemail. My little brother Leo. Same. They had cut me off completely. I leaned against my car and stared at the maple tree in the yard, the one my dad and I planted when I was 8. It still stood tall, its branches reaching for a house that was no longer ours. I had sent money home from my work-study job. I kept a 3.9 GPA in pre-law. I did everything right. And they left me behind like garbage. I didn't cry. Not then. I picked up the trash bags, threw them in the trunk, and drove to the cheapest motel I could find on Blackstone Avenue. That night, I laid everything out on the faded bedspread. Some textbooks, old sweaters, a broken hair straightener, a curling photo of my quinceañera, and silence. I lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. I could either break or start over. I chose the second. I had grown up in a house where family first wasn't just a saying, it was law. My parents had immigrated from Guadalajara in the 90s with nothing but work ethic and grit. Dad took overnight shifts at a refrigeration plant. Mom cleaned offices downtown. We suffer now, so you can succeed later, they'd say at dinner. Education is your ticket. So I studied while other kids partied. I volunteered with legal aid while my high school friends worked retail. I got into university on scholarships and scraped together cash with part-time jobs to cover everything else. Meanwhile, Leo, 2 years younger, was different. He barely passed high school, got caught shoplifting twice, and still lived at home. They never threatened to kick him out, never even raised their voices. He's just trying to find his path, my mom would say. Not everyone is like you. And maybe that's why their betrayal stung so much. I was the daughter who did everything right, and I was the one they threw away. The next morning, I did something I never imagined I'd need to do. I called Professor Carter, my constitutional law instructor at UCSB. She was sharp, fearless, and famously private. But she had taken a liking to me. She once wrote in the margins of a graded essay, "You argue like someone who's had to fight for every inch." When she picked up, I explained everything. Somehow, I kept my voice level. "They just left?" she said. "They didn't tell you where they were going?" "No, I don't even have a key to the house. Just trash bags." I paused. "I don't have anywhere to stay during break." There was a beat of silence. Then, "Pack your things. Come stay with me. No questions asked." Professor Carter's house looked like something from a movie. An old craftsman on a quiet street, shaded by jacaranda trees. Inside was chaos: piles of law books, half-drunk mugs of tea, and two cats who clearly thought they owned the place. She gave me the guest room, a stack of towels, and a key. "No curfew," she said, flipping the hallway light off. "Just finish your semester strong." That spring break, instead of resting, I buried myself in law journals. Professor Carter had secured me a summer internship at Valley Justice Group, a nonprofit focused on tenant rights. The irony hit me hard. I had been thrown out, and now I'd be fighting to keep other people housed. "Channel it," she told me over tea. "Turn pain into purpose." So I did. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not at school, not at work. When people asked if I'd gone home for break, I simply said, "No, not this time." I blocked my parents' numbers. My brothers, too. I wasn't being petty. I was protecting myself. If they could leave me once, they could do it again. I had to build something they could never destroy. I began sketching out a rough idea in my notebook: a support program for students facing housing instability, legal aid, emergency grants, off-campus support. I called it Haven Line. I had no idea if it would work, but the idea refused to leave me alone. At the end of break, I returned to campus. Not as someone shattered, but as someone rebuilding. They had erased me, but I would make myself unforgettable. When I started my summer internship at Valley Justice Group, I expected a dusty back office and a lot of scanning. Instead, on my very first day, I was sent to observe an intake meeting between one of the staff attorneys and a mother of three whose landlord had changed the locks without notice. They gave her 20 minutes to grab her things, the attorney, Nia Epps, explained afterward. 2 of her kids' school books are still inside. That was my welcome to housing law: cruel, chaotic, and deeply personal. And I was hooked. Within a week, I was shadowing intake interviews, helping draft response letters, and organizing tenant files. But more than anything, I listened. I listened to elderly tenants being pushed out for condo conversions, single mothers facing illegal evictions, students fighting slumlords who took their deposits and vanished. Each story felt like a version of mine: people discarded when they became inconvenient. Nia started leaving the intake room door open so I could sit in on interviews without asking. "You've got something most law students don't," she told me one day after I stayed late updating client files. "What's that?" I asked. "Empathy. You know what it feels like to be on the other side of the door." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing the woman from earlier in the day, her toddler clinging to her leg while she tried to explain how a rent increase had forced them to choose between groceries and housing. By 2 a.m., I was at the kitchen table in Professor Carter's house, sketching on a legal pad: a student-run initiative, emergency legal help, housing advocacy, prevention resources. The words Haven Line circled in the center. By sunrise, I had a rough concept: a campus-based support system for housing insecure students and low-income renters in the surrounding neighborhoods. Something more responsive, more personal, more proactive than the overloaded city hotline. When I showed it to Professor Carter later that day, she scanned the pages in silence, then looked up. "This is good. You're not just thinking like a student. You're thinking like a founder." As the weeks passed, I built out the proposal while working full-time at Valley Justice. Professor Carter suggested I apply for the Claremont Social Innovation Grant, which offered $25,000 to seed student-led community projects. The catch? The deadline was in 2 weeks. For the next 14 days, I barely slept. I went from interviews to class to late-night writing sessions, building Haven Line's framework from scratch. Nia helped me develop the legal components. Professor Carter reviewed every paragraph like a Supreme Court brief. By the time I submitted the 12-page proposal, my hands were shaking from exhaustion. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was designing my own way forward. Then came the voicemail. It was a number I hadn't saved, but I recognized the area code immediately. Fresno. Selena, my father's voice said, flat and familiar. Your mother's worried. Call us back. I stared at my phone for a long time. Worried? Where was that concern when they left my life packed in plastic bags? Where was it when I stood alone in front of a house that no longer belonged to me? I didn't call back. 3 days later, another voicemail. This silent treatment is immature. He snapped. You're being dramatic. We're still your parents. No apology, no explanation, just expectation. I blocked the number. They found other ways. Calls from unknown numbers, emails to my school address. One of my cousins even messaged me on Instagram. They feel bad. Can't you at least talk to them? I said nothing. Forgiveness isn't earned by sending voicemails. Especially not when no one admits what they did. When the email arrived from the Claremont Foundation a month later, I opened it with shaking hands. Congratulations. Your project Haven Line has been awarded full funding. I stared at the screen in disbelief. $25,000. It wasn't just about the money. It was validation that what I'd built from the ashes of my past had real power. Haven Line was no longer an idea. It was real. We converted an unused storage room at Valley Justice into our first Haven hub. 2 volunteer law students joined me, along with a part-time social work intern. We held workshops on renters' rights, offered emergency consultations, and created a database of safe, affordable student housing. By October, we had helped 19 students stay in their apartments. By November, that number had nearly doubled. The media attention came out of nowhere. A local journalist who had attended one of our legal clinics reached out about a feature. I almost declined. It felt too early, too personal, but Nia encouraged me to say yes. The article, titled Student Builds Housing Lifeline from Personal Pain, ran in the Santa Barbara Herald. My photo was on the front page of the lifestyle section, standing in the doorway of our cramped Haven hub with a stack of case files in my arms. I didn't think much of it. Until the phone rang again. Unknown number, local area code. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was my mother this time. Selena, we saw the article. We're proud of you. Can we talk? I deleted the message. Pride? Where was that pride when you left me behind? Where was that pride when you sold our house and dropped me into silence? The people who mattered were already in my life. Naya, Professor Carter, my team at Haven Line. They had seen my worth without a byline or a grant. I didn't need to reopen wounds just because the world had started paying attention. But something had shifted again. Not in me, but in them. Now that I had built something meaningful, something visible, they suddenly wanted back in. I wasn't ready to face them, but soon I'd have no choice. By the end of the semester, Haven Line had outgrown the cramped storage room at Valley Justice. We had helped over 30 students avoid wrongful evictions, worked with 12 low-income families on lease disputes, and built a modest directory of reliable housing partners across Santa Barbara. Word was spreading, too fast, honestly. Our intake forms were piling up. Students came to me between classes. Tenants left messages after hours. The emotional toll was building. But I loved it. Every success felt personal. Every lease extension, every security deposit recovered. It was like rewriting my own story in real time. And then the voicemails returned. First from my father. This has gone on long enough, Selena. You've made your point. Then from my mother. You don't understand what we were going through. Can we please explain? Then from Leo. They're really sorry, you know. They just didn't know how to handle everything. Still, no one said the words I needed to hear. We abandoned you. We were wrong. We are sorry. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on our next step: expansion. There were thousands of students across California facing housing insecurity. We needed more money, more hands, more infrastructure. That's when Naya introduced me to the Bradshaw Foundation, a well-known philanthropic organization that funded grassroots justice initiatives. Their grant program could provide up to $300,000 over 3 years. This would change everything, I told Nia after reading the application details. Then let's go get it, she said. You're already doing the work. Now it's time to scale it. The application process was intense. 47 pages of impact data, personal testimony, legal methodology, and measurable outcomes. I worked on it every night for weeks, often until 3 a.m. in the quiet corners of the library or Professor Carter's living room. Just as I finalized the submission, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Fresno area code. I let it ring. Then came the voicemail. Selena, it's Mrs. Alvarez from next door. That stopped me cold. I hadn't heard her voice since the day I stood in front of my old house with 3 garbage bags and no explanation. I hope it's okay, I called. She said gently. Your brother gave me your number. He said you might not answer if you saw their names. She sighed. Something strange happened last night. Someone broke into your old house. The police think it was a squatter or someone looking for valuables. But they left something behind. An envelope. With your name on it. My heart skipped. It looks official, she added. It's from a law firm. I didn't open it. I figured I'd better ask you first. I called her back immediately. Mrs. Alvarez, please. Can you open it? I need to know what it says. She hesitated, then carefully tore it open. I could hear the rustle of legal paper. It's about your grandmother's estate, she said finally. My grandmother in Mexico? Yes. It says, you've inherited property in Oaxaca. And there's a bank statement. Selena, it shows a balance of over $400,000. I sat back, stunned. That can't be right, I whispered. Apparently the property was developed after she passed. Mrs. Alvarez read slowly. Resort condominiums. Your share is from the sale of 2 units. I grabbed a pen and scribbled down the law firm's name, address, and contact number as she read it to me. Thank you, I said. My voice was calm, but my fingers were trembling. I called the firm in Oaxaca the next morning. They confirmed it. The inheritance was real. My grandmother, who had passed when I was 13, had owned land that had been developed into vacation rentals. The sale had gone through last year. My portion, 417 to 200, had been in limbo for months. There was one detail that made everything clear. The initial notification about the inheritance had been sent to my parents. Over a year ago. I had still been 19. Legally, they had been my guardians. They had known. They had received the letter. They had never told me. And 1 month later, they moved out. Left me behind. Took everything. I stared at the email from the law firm, rereading the confirmation like it might disappear. You've always been so quick to judge, my father had said in a recent voicemail. But now I understood. They hadn't just left me. They had left with knowledge of my future, my independence, my safety net, and they chose not to tell me. Later that night, I sat at the edge of my bed in Professor Carter's guest room. I told her everything, every word of Mrs. Alvarez's message, every sentence of the legal summary. She listened quietly. They sold the house, I said, put my life in garbage bags, knew I had money coming, and still walked away. Her expression was unreadable. Do you know what you're going to do? I don't know. I haven't touched the money yet. I feel like I can finally breathe. She nodded slowly. That kind of betrayal, it doesn't leave scars. It leaves blueprints. The next morning, I received an email from the Bradshaw Foundation. Congratulations. You've been selected as a finalist. Please prepare your presentation for board review. Normally, I would have jumped up and screamed. Instead, I stared at the screen with quiet, simmering purpose. They had tried to erase me, but now I had 2 things they could never take away: a mission, and a future. The week leading up to the Bradshaw Foundation presentation passed in a blur of preparation. Our proposal wasn't just about growth, it was about survival. Haven Line had reached a tipping point. We had more cases than staff, more emails than volunteers, more need than hours in the day. We needed funding, or we would drown. But even as I rehearsed my slides, edited testimonials, and combed through housing data, my mind kept drifting back to the inheritance. For $17,200. It sat untouched in a new account under my name. I didn't know what to do with it, not yet. I had built Haven Line from nothing, brick by emotional brick. That money had been hidden from me. I wasn't going to let it shape my story now. Not until I understood it. On Thursday afternoon, I called the law firm in Oaxaca again, seeking clarification. Yes, Ms. Cruz, the attorney confirmed. The initial inheritance notice was sent to your legal guardians last March. You were 19 at the time, so it was standard procedure. And they didn't respond? They did. Your father responded by confirming receipt. He signed a document acknowledging that the funds were to be held until you turned 21. My stomach flipped. They signed paperwork? Yes, ma'am. Would you like a scanned copy? When it arrived in my inbox an hour later, there it was, my father's signature. A year before he told me to deal with it. A year before they left my things on the porch. They knew. They chose to keep me in the dark. And then they left. That night, I sat down with Professor Carter and showed her everything. This wasn't just abandonment, I said. This was theft of knowledge, of agency. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, have you considered they might have intended to use it? I flinched. You think they tried to take the money? I don't know, she said. But people do strange things when they feel desperate, or entitled. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't unsee the timeline. The inheritance notification, the sudden move, the silence. And now, after the press coverage, after the grant news, they wanted back in. The day of the presentation arrived with clear skies and high tension. The Bradshaw Foundation offices were elegant and intimidating. Glass walls, sharp suits, a skyline view of downtown Los Angeles. I arrived an hour early, notes neatly arranged in my leather folder, slides ready, blazer pressed. Nia arrived soon after, all business in a charcoal gray suit. She squeezed my shoulder. You're ready for this, she said. You've been ready. We were escorted into a sleek boardroom with a dozen members seated around a mahogany table. Among them was William Bradshaw, the Foundation's founder and a known philanthropist in the social justice space. Ms. Cruz, Ms. Epps, he greeted warmly. We were impressed by your proposal. Show us why Haven Line deserves our support. I launched into the presentation, Haven Line's origin, its mission, our metrics, our future goals. I spoke about eviction rates among college students, about illegal rent hikes, about how we had helped 64 clients retain housing in the past 8 months. Nia provided the legal framework, I provided the heart. 20 minutes in, just as I was transitioning to our scalability model, a foundation assistant entered the room and whispered something to Mr. Bradshaw. He nodded, then turned to me with an apologetic smile. Ms. Cruz, I'm sorry to interrupt. There are individuals in the lobby. They say they're your family. They've insisted it's urgent. My mouth went dry. Family? Would you like us to ask them to wait until after the presentation? He asked gently. I felt the room tilt slightly, but I kept my voice steady. Yes, I said. Please ask them to wait. This is too important to interrupt. After we finished, the board applauded. Bradshaw stood and shook my hand. I've seen many proposals, he said, but your clarity and conviction are rare. We'll be in touch soon. As we gathered our materials, Nia glanced at me. You okay? I nodded slowly. Now I have to go face the other pitch. My parents and Leo were waiting in the reception area, awkward and out of place. My mother stood when she saw me. "Selena," she said, voice cracking, "we need to talk." My father's expression was hard to read, part shame, part pride, part something else I didn't care to identify. "I'll give you space," Nia said softly. "Call me after." I sat down across from them. "Why are you here?" I asked. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "We saw the newspaper article," she began. "We didn't know you'd done all this." "So you came to congratulate me?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "We came to ask for forgiveness." I studied their faces. My mother looked older, tired. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Leo couldn't meet my eyes. "We made mistakes," my father said. "We know that now." "You left me," I said. "You sold the house. You knew about the inheritance. You put my life in bags." My mother's eyes filled. "We were scared. We were ashamed." "You were greedy," I said. "You knew I had money coming and you left anyway." Leo finally spoke. "They were wrong, Selena. I told them that. But they didn't know what else to do. Everything was falling apart." "And so you left me to fall apart alone?" I said. My father leaned forward. "You don't understand what it's like to be a parent and feel like a failure. And you don't understand what it's like to be a daughter who no longer has a home," I replied. There was silence. "I've rebuilt," I said finally. "From nothing. Without your help. Without your approval." My mother tried again. "Can't we start over?" I shook my head. "You don't get to walk away and then return because you're impressed with who I became." I stood, voice calm, spine straight. "If you want to make amends, start by respecting the boundaries I've built." And I left. I walked out of that coffee shop with my spine straight, my heart pounding and my mind spinning. Not from guilt, but from clarity. For the first time since that day on the porch, I felt fully in control. They didn't expect me to say no. Not after they showed up at the Bradshaw Foundation. Not after they begged for forgiveness. They expected the obedient daughter, the fixer, the one who never made trouble. But that girl was gone. I'd buried her the day I stuffed 3 garbage bags of memories into my trunk. The next morning, I sat in the quiet of Professor Carter's breakfast nook, slowly stirring my tea. "They came all the way to LA to try and get me to fold," I said. "And you didn't," she replied. "I shouldn't feel proud about it," I murmured. "But I do." "You should. That was a test. One you didn't ask for, but passed." She slid a manila envelope across the table toward me. "Speaking of tests, this just arrived." I opened it, recognizing the crest of the Bradshaw Foundation on the letterhead. "Award notice. Grant approved. $300,000 awarded over 3 years. Additional $50,000 discretionary operational support." I read the letter 3 times before I let it sink in. We'd done it. Haven Line was no longer a scrappy campus project. It was real. Funded, recognized, respected. Tears welled up in my eyes. Not from relief, but from something deeper. Validation. Everything they tried to take from me, I had rebuilt with my own hands. A week later, our local NPR affiliate ran a profile on Haven Line. Then the Los Angeles Chronicle picked it up. A few days after that, I got a call from a producer at PBS, asking to feature us in a documentary segment about student-led justice movements. The same day, I received a letter from the Oaxaca law firm. It was confirmation that the final estate transfer had been completed. The funds, now fully mine, were available for disbursement or investment. There was a handwritten note attached from the managing attorney. "Your grandmother left this for your future, not for anyone else's." It hit me like a wave. My grandmother hadn't just left me money. She had left me dignity. A parachute I hadn't known was waiting. They tried to cut the cord. but she'd tied one back behind them. Later that week, I met with Nia and our legal team to plan Haven Line's next moves. With the Bradshaw grant secured, we could hire 2 full-time staff, lease a proper office, and even launch a statewide tenants' rights hotline. "This is the moment, Selena," Nia said. "You're not just helping students anymore. You're shaping policy." I nodded slowly. "I want to use part of my inheritance to match the grant." She blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I want to protect what we're building. Not just for today. For the long term." She smiled. "That's bold." "No," I said. "It's intentional." That night my phone lit up again. Another voicemail. My mother's voice. "Selena, we saw the segment on TV. You looked beautiful. So strong. We're proud of you. We hope we still matter." There was no return call. No anger. No response. Just silence. Because I had finally learned. Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your decision not to need it. A month later, I stood in our new office space, holding the key in my hand. A modest building off East Lake Avenue. Exposed brick, creaky floors, sunlit windows. Home, in a way. Not the kind I grew up in, but the kind I built. We'd hired 2 paralegals and 1 part-time social worker. Students from across California were applying to intern with us. Even the university president sent a handwritten note of congratulations. Haven Line was real. And it was mine. Sometimes at night, I still hear their voices, echoes of old conversations, holidays, childhood fights. They are ghosts now. Not because I hate them, but because I survived them. There is a difference. On the first day in the new office, I found a note taped to the door from a student I had helped earlier that semester. "Because of you, I didn't have to sleep in my car. Thank you, Selena." I folded it up and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. A reminder of what matters. A reminder of why I said no. The day the PBS special aired, I didn't tell anyone to watch. I just showed up to work like it was any other Wednesday. But by noon, my inbox had exploded. Professors, former classmates, judges, law school admissions officers, even strangers from across the country. The segment featured our tiny team at Haven Line, interviewing clients, showing our new office, and ending with a clip of me saying, "When I lost my home, I thought I lost everything. But what I gained was the clarity to fight for others who feel just as erased." It aired for 6 minutes. It changed my life forever. That night, I stayed late at the office. Everyone else had gone home. The sun had dipped below the hills. The silence felt earned. I sat at my desk and watched the last rays touch the framed note in my drawer, the one from the student I'd helped. "Because of you, I didn't have to sleep in my car." A quiet knock startled me. It was Professor Carter holding a small manila folder. "I thought you should see this," she said, handing it over. Inside was a letter addressed to me. From my grandmother. Postmarked 7 years ago, but never forwarded. "Mi querida Selena, I may not be here to see you grow, but I know you will shine. Whatever they try to take from you, remember, you are more than where you came from. You are where you choose to go." I closed my eyes. 7 years ago, she knew. She knew what I'd forget until much later. That love is not what people say. It's what they choose to preserve. And she chose me. 2 weeks later, the Bradshaw Foundation invited me to speak at their annual gala. I stood before an audience of donors, activists, and public officials, heart pounding beneath a navy blue dress. "I'm not here tonight because of what was given to me," I said. "I'm here because of what was taken." Gasps from the crowd. I was erased. Quietly, intentionally. But I rebuilt, piece by piece, so that others wouldn't have to go through what I did. Haven Line is not just about housing, it's about humanity. When I left the stage, people were crying, applauding, standing. I felt taller than I ever had before. The next day, Leo called me. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, the part that still wanted to believe some ties weren't poison, picked up. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for anything. I just wanted to say, he said quietly, what they did wasn't fair, and I should have said something sooner. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. You still have your life to make, I said. So do you. I already am. We didn't say goodbye, but for the first time, I didn't hang up angry. I hung up free. By the end of the year, Haven Line had assisted over 200 individuals. We launched a statewide legal clinic tour. I spoke at 3 universities. The State Bar of California invited me to serve on their advisory committee for tenant protections. And the inheritance? I used a portion of it to create the Cruz Fellowship Fund, a scholarship for first-generation students pursuing housing justice law. Because legacy isn't money. It's motion. It's how far you're willing to reach back, and how far you help others rise forward. Sometimes I walk past the old street in Fresno just to remind myself how far I've come. The house is still there, but it doesn't belong to me anymore. That's okay. I have something they can't ever sell, move out of, or throw in garbage bags. I have myself. And that's enough. Final scene. Narration fade out. I used to think family was everything, but sometimes it's the people who choose you, who believe in you when no one else does, who become your true home. I wasn't just abandoned, I was reborn. And from the ashes, I built something stronger than their silence. I built a legacy.